everyone watches this team. Everyone cares about Dawn Staley. I go to the barbershop, they're talking about Dawn Staley. I go to restaurants, they're talking about Dawn Staley. My family here, they're talking about Dawn Staley. It doesn't matter who. If you are in Columbia, you know Dawn Staley, and they go hard for Dawn Staley. You cannot mess with Coach Staley, because they are ready to ride at any moment for their coach. I mean, obviously I'm from Miami, didn't really grow up in a college town, covered Penn State and Pennsylvania, but coming to Columbia and seeing how much they love Dawn Staley is unlike anything else, especially with the growth she's put in for women's basketball.
Welcome back to another episode of South Carolina Sideline, everyone. I'm Claire Foley, joined alongside Jared Parker. Happy to be with you for another episode. Every Tuesday, these episodes drop, and we don't want you to miss out. So make sure you're following us, subscribing, liking, all the things. You can watch these episodes every single week on YouTube. You can also keep up with us on social media. Both of our social media pages are our first and last name and TV. So Claire Foley TV, Jared Parker TV. We post clips there from these podcast episodes. You can also follow on Instagram at SC Sideline. And as always, listen wherever you find your podcast. Spotify, Apple, Amazon, you name it, we're there. Okay, getting into this week's episode. Jared, the moment we've all been waiting for, hearing where MiLaysia Fulwiley would be going. Obviously, the South Carolina homegrown star entered the transfer portal a few weeks ago. There was some chatter about where she might end up, but now we officially know that she is heading to Baton Rouge. She's going to be an LSU Tiger. Jared, I know we had talked about maybe she would go out to the West Coast to join the other USC. Were you surprised by LSU?
Oh man, I was so surprised. I mean, how often is it that, you have one of your beloved players leave to kind of your arch nemesis, your rival? I mean, and we say rival, it's rival in a technical sense. It's not really a rivalry lately. South Carolina has beat them a lot.
Sure.
But still, the bad blood is there. The bad blood is definitely there between South Carolina and LSU. They're two programs that don't like each other. So for a Columbia kid to go to LSU, I mean, I think MiLaysia's going to do well there. I think she has talent. We don't have to say that. But just to see a Columbia kid born and raised, go from South Carolina to LSU, that was a shock for me. And I'm like, just what does it say about the state of college athletics that you have a kid like that leave to your rival?
I think what's so funny, and that we've seen in the last couple years because of the transfer portal and because all these players grow up playing against each other, playing with each other in AAU and club teams and things like that. So even if they're rivals or enemies or anything on the court for whatever jersey they're wearing, off the court, they're all friends. And that's something we've seen. There's no true bad blood between any of them. I think they're all competitors. And so you might feel that. Yeah, the fans definitely getting in on it. But yeah, I mean, she's going from one coaching legend to another with Kim Mulkey. What do you think Kim Mulkey as a coach has to offer MiLaysia other than just minutes?
I mean, just from an outside perspective, Kim Mulkey is intense. Like, she's a little bit intimidating, but I think when you look at both programs, either or, I think MiLaysia was going to do well. Kim Mulkey does make pros, just like Dawn Staley makes pros. Kim Mulkey makes pros. So I know there's been a little bit of concern. Obviously, South Carolina fans aren't happy. They don't know if it's the right choice. But Kim Mulkey has made pros. She continues to make pros. Most recently, Anissa Morrow going in the top 10 of the WNBA draft. So I think, like you said, she has to offer minutes. I think MiLaysia will probably be playing significantly more at LSU than she was here. But I think she also goes into a program with a coach who, is no nonsense. And if you put in the work with Mulkey, you're going to become a pro, because we've seen that happen time and time again.
And we've also seen other Gamecocks go from being here in South Carolina, transfer out to try to get more minutes. And it works out for them. Sanaya Rivers was here. She goes to NC State and she's a top 10 pick
Right.
this year. So sometimes it is just getting those reps, getting those minutes. And in a sport like basketball, where it is so finite number of players you have on the court and number of minutes in the game, it's going to be hard to balance out. And especially in a program like South Carolina that tries to be so evenly spread. I think that one thing that is funny about all of this, you remember when LSU came here earlier in this season, Kim Mulkey kind of started the chatter that other coaches eventually started getting in on about the McDonald's All-American.
Yeah.
So Kim Mulkey's got herself a McDonald's All-American coming
She
to her.
does. She might have planted a seed there. Who knows? I don't think she was actually planting a seed, but it is ironic to go back and look at that and see that's the conversation that transpired. And not only did she get an All-American, she got, maybe one of the most talented players in the entire nation. So it is ironic looking back at that and seeing how this whole process went down.
And it's funny because when she said it, people said, "Oh, you recruit that way. You just go out and get them." So she said, "Okay, bet."
Right, yeah.
I'll take one of yours.
No problem. That is ironic.
So MiLaysia Fulwiley going from South Carolina and Dawn Staley to LSU, and Kim Mulkey, two absolute legends in the game, and head coach Dawn Staley getting another honor here in Columbia later this week on Wednesday. Her statue is going to be unveiled right near the State House next to the Alumni Center at the university. This is something that was announced a while back, but they just announced it today on Monday that it's going to be happening this week on Wednesday. So that's coming up for us. Jared, you came here to watch Fox in Columbia, South Carolina in December?
Yeah.
December? Okay, I can't believe it's been that long already. But so obviously you knew about the Gamecocks. You knew about Dawn Staley long before this. You knew the legend that they were. But since coming and being in Columbia and seeing Dawn Staley around the fans, around the team, what have you learned about how much this city loves Dawn Staley?
I mean, her influence is absolutely remarkable. I mean, obviously, I'm from Miami. Didn't really grow up in a college town. Covered Penn State and Pennsylvania, but coming to Columbia and seeing how much they love Dawn Staley is unlike anything else, especially with the growth she's put in for women's basketball. I mean, everyone watches this team. Everyone cares about Dawn Staley. I go to the barbershop, they're talking about Dawn Staley. I go to restaurants, they're talking about Dawn Staley. My family here, they're talking about Dawn Staley. It doesn't matter who. If you are in Columbia, you know Dawn Staley, and they go hard for Dawn Staley. You cannot mess with Coach Staley because they are ready to ride at any moment for their coach. So it's so amazing to see her recognized like this. I know it's going to be packed. That really is going to be packed, but it's just so remarkable. I've not been a bunch of places, but I've also not personally ever seen a whole city really get behind their coach like they're behind Dawn.
Yeah, you see teams, cities, fan bases rallying around star players.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to see a star coach in that way. But it's definitely a recognition that is well-deserved, something we always talk about that we notice because we're going to so many different South Carolina athletic events is how present she is. Obviously, you see her at her own games, but she's at men's basketball games. She's at football games. She's checking in on the other teams, rooting for them on social media when she can't be there in person. And obviously, that's something that I'm sure the university loves, that they have an ambassador like that to grow the school's brand as a whole. But I think it says a lot about her and how much she loves Columbia and the University of South Carolina. So it's definitely going to be a fun and busy and packed day on Wednesday, and we'll be sure to bring you coverage of that. We'll talk about it next week on South Carolina Sideline, but you can also find our coverage of it on our social media platforms, like I said at the beginning, but also, of course, on Watch Fox 57 and on our specific 30-minute sports show every weekday night at 11 o'clock. Again, on Watch Fox 57. We're going to take a quick break here, but when we come back, we're talking about the Gamecocks that were picked up last weekend during the NFL draft. Welcome back to South Carolina Sideline. Okay, at the end of last week, It was the NFL draft, and several Gamecocks got picked up in the first 7 rounds of it. 5, to be exact, all defensive players. Now, throughout the entire draft this year, there's a whole lot of talk about guys going earlier or later than what was expected. Jared, from the 5 guys from South Carolina who had their names called in the draft this year, who stuck out to you as maybe being surprising of where and when they went?
I mean, obviously, Nick Emmanwori was a little surprising. I thought he was a first rounder, slid a little, pick 35 overall. That's not a huge slide. It's almost day one, so that's not really a big deal. But Kyle Kennard sliding to round 4, that shocked me. I really did not expect that slide. I mean, he was one of the best defensive linemen in the entire country, and he won the awards to show that. So for someone like him to have such a stellar season and then slide to round 4, I mean, the Chargers got a steal. That is an absolute value pick at round 4, and I really think he is a pro guy that's going to do really well. So if I'm the Chargers, I'm not upset about him sliding to me, in round 4, and you're not going to have to pay him as much as a round 1 guy, at least for these first couple years. So that's a steal on their end, but I was surprised he went more than 100 picks without anyone saying, hey, this guy's still on the board, right?
Yeah, like I said, I think there were a couple moves throughout the first couple rounds of the draft that had people raising some eyebrows. But if you look at the draft as a whole this year compared to last year, there was a lot that was different. And for different reasons, I don't know if either one was necessarily an anomaly. It was just different. Yeah. And it does differ every year depending on what these teams are looking for. So if you look at last year in the first round, the first 12 picks, 6 quarterbacks went.
Yeah.
This year, first 12 picks, 1 quarterback went. So it's just a difference of what teams are looking for from year to year. But let's go down the list and take a look at where those 5 Gamecocks went in the draft. So Nick Emmanwori, he went first for the Gamecocks. He was selected in the 2nd round, 35th overall. He's going to the Seattle Seahawks. TJ Sanders, picked up by the Buffalo Bills in 2nd round, 41st overall. The Bills traded up to be able to get him. Demetrius Knight Jr., picked by the Bengals, 49th overall, 2nd round. And like you said, Kyle Kennard, 4th round, 125th pick overall, but he's going to the Chargers. Tonka Hemingway going to the Raiders, 135th pick in the 4th round. And there have been a handful of others that have either been signed as undrafted free agents, or a lot have gotten some camp invites. And so that just really speaks to how the program here at South Carolina prepares these guys for the next level. We were just talking about in basketball how Kim Mulkey over at LSU and Dawn Staley, they make these kids pro ready. And I think you can say the same thing about Gamecock football, especially for the defensive side of the ball. The 5 guys to go in the draft itself, all defensive players. And I had the chance to talk to Jack Veltri last week before the draft. He's from Gamecock Central, about what it says that these guys are getting picked up and pro ready, and what kind of coaching staff they have here at South Carolina.
I think there's a lot of different ways you can go about. Obviously, you mentioned the all SEC honors. That says a lot, because you're playing, I think, it's fair to say that the SEC is one of the premier conferences, if not the premier conference in college football, because you're going up against NFL caliber players every single weekend in this conference. And South Carolina, gets to go up against schools like Alabama, LSU, Texas A&M, really good teams in this conference. There's so many more, obviously, every single week, and they're making big plays. And, it's reflected in the year that they had last season. Now, a lot of that goes back to the coaching, Shane Beamer recruiting them to come here. But also, you look at different position coaches, like Torian Gray has done a heck of a job. It seems like every single year he's getting guys to the NFL. Like, it's going to be Nick Emmanwori this year. I would imagine O'Donnell Fortune will be picked somewhere probably in the later rounds, but he'll be drafted. There's a lot of different talents over the years with the different position coaches. And it says a lot about what, Clayton White has done as the defensive coordinator at South Carolina, and what you're seeing now with the offense and a few guys that could be drafted on that side of the ball. So it's a very talented team that they had last year. And a lot of that goes back to the accolades that they racked up in the offseason, and then also just the years they had with the talented coaches they have coaching them.
Okay, thanks so much again to Jack Veltri from Gamecocks Central for joining us last week to help us preview the draft, give us some inside looks into the South Carolina Gamecocks coaching staff and what those guys have to offer teams at the next level. But that does it here for this week's episode of South Carolina. Short and sweet for you this week, but I'm sure we'll have plenty more to talk about with you next week. Of course, we said on Wednesday, Don Staley getting that statue over by the State House and University, so definitely a lot of content to come out of that for you. Yeah, we'll have to see who's out there for her on Wednesday. But make sure you like, follow, subscribe, all the things you can watch on YouTube, listen on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, all the things. You can follow clips of the show. We post them on our social media platforms at Claire Foley TV and at Jared Parker TV. You can also follow us on Instagram at SC Sideline. Thanks so much for being here with us this week. Hope to catch you again on the next one.